My son Liam always had a way of drawing in the most unusual kids. I never quite figured out why, but from a young age, he seemed to connect with the ones others might consider odd. I've got a dozen tales about this, but one in particular has stayed with me like a splinter under the skin. Liam was in 4th grade when we moved across the state. My husband had gotten a job transfer, so everything was new: home, neighborhood, school. Thankfully, Liam was a naturally outgoing, kind-hearted boy. He made friends quickly, and it didn't take long for him to settle in. As a family, the transition was going smoothly. I first met the other parents during a school function. Everyone seemed decent, polite, just your average, respectable folks. So, when the school called me in a few months later about an incident, I was blindsided. My husband was at work, so I went alone. I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me was frustrated. Had Liam gotten into a fight? That wasn't like him at all. But mostly I was confused. He was never aggressive, never even rough with other kids. He'd always been open, communicative, and gentle. When I picked him up, he wouldn't say a word, completely out of character. Usually, he'd ramble nonstop about his day, his thoughts, anything and everything. But this time, he just stared at the floor as we walked to the office. The principal asked Liam to wait outside. I sat down, and he started the conversation with questions about Liam's behavior at home. Does he follow rules? Is he respectful? Does he act out? I told him honestly. Liam was well-behaved and kind-hearted. I wasn't exaggerating, just telling the truth. Then came the explanation. Liam had apparently hit a classmate, someone named Nolan, after recess. Just the two of them were outside, heading back inside when, according to both of their accounts, Liam took an eraser from his pocket and hit Nolan on the head with it. Nolan fell, screamed, and caused a scene. I was speechless. Not only was that totally out of character, but Liam liked Nolan. He talked about him often, called him one of his best friends. The principal admitted no teachers saw it happen, but both boys told the same story. He said Liam wouldn't be punished since no one was seriously hurt. It was more of a scuffle than a fight. I was relieved, but still deeply unsettled. That evening, Liam stayed quiet until bedtime. I was growing frustrated with his silence when he finally opened up. And what he said stunned me. He explained that they'd been pretending to play a fighting game, like Street Brawlers, some game Nolan made up. Nolan told Liam to use the eraser for a final hit, so Liam did. Then, out of nowhere, Nolan collapsed, started screaming, and whispered to Liam, "Say you attacked me, or I'll hurt you." So Liam went along with the story. I was furious. My son had been manipulated, set up, and no adult had seen the truth. Instead of going straight to the school, I took another route. I found Nolan's mother's number in the school directory. Her name was Melissa. I didn't know what to expect when I called, but she was warm, apologetic, and surprisingly honest. She told me she already knew. Nolan had admitted what he did, and she'd spoken to him about it. I was surprised that he'd confessed so quickly, but relieved it was handled. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. She mentioned Nolan had always had behavioral quirks. Sometimes he'd speak or act as if he was someone entirely different. She said doctors believed he'd grow out of it, and that he'd recently shown improvement. Melissa suggested the boys have a sleepover to patch things up. She offered to host. I hesitated, but she seemed sincere, and I wanted to believe her. That weekend, I drove Liam over. He was back to his cheerful self. Melissa welcomed me warmly. We shared a glass of wine while the boys played in the basement. She was easy to talk to, and I began to feel more at ease. Eventually, I asked gently about Nolan's behavior. Her mood shifted. She lowered her voice and admitted he'd seen specialists. The consensus was hopeful, she said. He wasn't dangerous, just different. That was enough to ease my nerves. Before leaving, I went downstairs to say goodnight. The boys were laughing, playing a board game. Everything looked fine. I hugged Liam and went home. The next morning, I arrived to pick him up. He was packed and smiling. I thought everything had gone great. But as we drove away, he suddenly burst into tears. I asked him what happened, and what he said made my blood run cold. He explained that during the night, he woke up for no reason. Then he heard whispering, coming from the basement bathroom. The door was slightly open, and a dim, flickering light glowed inside. Not a regular light, he said. It looked like candlelight. Liam leaned closer to hear. It was Nolan's voice, but he wasn't just whispering, he was having a conversation. Not with anyone visible, just the mirror. Even stranger, Nolan wasn't calling himself Nolan. He kept referring to himself as Mr. Harrow. Liam was frozen. The light eventually went out, and the bathroom went dark. Then the door creaked open, and Liam heard whispering again, right above his head. He didn't understand the words. It didn't sound like English. He was too terrified to move. Eventually, Nolan climbed back into his bed like nothing had happened. By morning, he was completely normal. I was horrified. This wasn't just a sleep-deprived child's dream. It felt real. Too real. I called Melissa. At first, she laughed it off, saying Nolan was imaginative. But when I pressed her, she grew quiet. Then she admitted the truth. Nolan had been evaluated for more serious disorders. One psychiatrist believed he might have dissociative identity disorder. She confessed they had already relocated twice because Nolan had been expelled. I was furious. Why hadn't she told me that? Then she did something unexpected. She begged me not to tell the school. I was torn. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. But in my heart, I knew something had to be done. Before I could make a decision, it was already out of my hands. That Monday, Nolan attacked another student during recess. It was serious. The school sent a vague notice to all parents. By the end of the day, Nolan had been expelled. I tried calling Melissa again, but her number was disconnected. No explanation. Nothing. I felt sick. Just days before, we'd spoken like normal people. Now she and her son were gone. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I drove to their house. It was completely empty. No sign of moving trucks. No boxes. No forwarding info. Just gone. I searched online. No social media, no forwarding address. No trace at all. It was as if they'd vanished. That was years ago. Liam doesn't remember much of it now, and I'm grateful for that. But I do. I think about it often, and sometimes I wonder what really happened in that basement, and what Nolan or Mr. Harrow is doing now. My childhood wasn't exactly what you'd call typical. I was raised in a deeply religious household, one rooted in a strict evangelical tradition. In our home, ghosts didn't exist, but demons? Those were very real. Let me explain. Any strange noise, flickering light, or unexplainable event wasn't chalked up to coincidence or spirits. It was always something darker, something biblical. I never fully accepted that belief, but it was embedded in me from a young age. Doubting demons meant doubting scripture. My mom, however, was different. She wasn't particularly religious. She didn't reject faith, she just didn't care. When I asked her why she didn't go to church, she'd shrug and say, "God and I don't bother each other." I found comfort in religion, it gave me order. But for her, it was just noise. That difference became one of many divides between us over the years. I won't pretend she was well. My mother battled addiction and mental health problems, things she refused to get help for. Some days she was lucid, kind, funny. Other days she was not there. Now that I'm older, I'm almost certain she had some form of schizophrenia or something close to it. But back then, no one talked about things like that, especially not in our town. One afternoon, I had a dream that still chills me when I think about it. I was in bed when she suddenly stormed into my room, her face twisted with rage. She grabbed me by the arm and started shaking me violently, screaming something unintelligible. I woke up in a cold sweat, breathing hard, paralyzed. Then, moments later, it happened again. Only this time, I was wide awake. She burst through my bedroom door with that exact same expression. The same wild fury in her eyes. The same shouted words. The exact same sequence, as if the dream had come to life. I managed to yell at her, push her back, and she suddenly snapped out of it, turning and walking away like nothing happened. The next morning, when I confronted her, she looked genuinely confused. She had no memory of it. If anything, she seemed hurt that I was scared of her. I told myself it was a weird coincidence, a dream mirroring real life, but deep down, something didn't sit right. A few weeks later, something even stranger happened. I heard her yelling in the backyard, not screaming in pain or fear, yelling in what I can only describe as joy. I rushed out and froze. She was barefoot in the grass, smiling, holding a massive snake in her bare hands. Now that might not sound terrifying on its own, but my mother had always been terrified of snakes, couldn't even watch them on TV without flinching. And yet there she was, standing tall with this huge serpent coiled around her forearms like it was nothing. She called me over, asking if I wanted to hold it. I remember stepping back, shaking my head, saying something like, "Mom, are you out of your mind?" But the way she looked at me, like she didn't even understand English, was worse than anything. Her grin got wider. She tilted her head, studying me like prey. Couldn't take it. I ran inside, slammed the door, and watched from the window as she stood in the yard, cradling the snake like it was an offering. Eventually, she let it slide to the ground and came back inside, silent, calm. Later, when I brought it up, she looked at me like I was the crazy one. She laughed and said I must have been dreaming, but I knew what I saw. I felt it in my chest. It was real. Still, none of that compares to what happened later that year. It was during winter, and my youth group hosted an overnight retreat at the church. I was grateful to be there. Church was my escape from the chaos at home. My mom dropped me off in good spirits. She was sober, clear-eyed. She even hugged me before she left. Around 4:30 in the morning, after most of us had finally settled down to sleep, a loud knock echoed through the chapel. Everyone sat up. The knocking wasn't random. It was rhythmic, circling the building like something or someone was pacing outside. Sometimes it sounded like it came from more than one place at once. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe an animal, maybe the wind, but the pattern was too intentional. The only adult awake was the pastor, and he hadn't heard it. I ran to his office and pulled him into the sanctuary. As soon as he walked in, the knocking stopped. He opened the front doors and staggered back. There, standing barefoot in the snow, was my mother. Her clothes were drenched in sweat, her hair matted. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. She didn't look at anyone but me, and when our eyes met, she smiled. Slowly, deliberately, then she stepped forward. I wanted to run. The pastor grabbed my arm and whispered, "Stay here," but I couldn't move. It was like something inside me compelled me to follow her. I got into the car. She didn't say a word. The entire drive was silent. When we got home, she paused in the doorway, turned and stared at me. No expression, just an eerie, blank stare. Then she walked inside. I went straight to my room, locked the door, lay awake all night, heart pounding. In the morning, she was cheerful. She was in the kitchen making breakfast, humming to herself. When I walked in, she jumped a little and said, "I was just about to come pick you up from the church." I stared at her. She had no idea what had happened. None. When I tried to bring it up, she thought I was joking. Even weirder, no one from the church said a word. Not the pastor, not the youth leaders, not even the other kids. It was like it never happened. But I know what I saw. That was decades ago. My mom has long since passed, and while much of it has faded, those memories, the snake, the knocking, the icy stare, still haunt me. Do I believe in demons? I don't know anymore. The logical explanation is mental illness. Maybe it was psychosis, withdrawal, delusion. But some nights, when I lie awake remembering the way she acted, how her voice changed, how she stared through me, how something came into our house that wasn't her, I'm not so sure logic covers it. I try to believe there's a rational reason, but deep down, I'm not convinced. My oldest child began sleepwalking when he was around 8 or 9. I'd heard about kids going through odd phases like that, so I didn't panic at first. It was more unsettling than anything else. Just one of those childhood quirks you chalk up to growing pains. I'm a light sleeper, always have been. so it didn't take long before I caught on. Most nights, I'd wake to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway. I'd find him just outside my bedroom, standing still, gently rocking back and forth on his heels. His eyes were always open, but they looked through me, not at me. If you've ever lived with someone who sleepwalks, you know that vacant stare. It's not blank. It's searching, as if they're seeing something you can't. Sometimes he mumbled, barely audible words that made no sense. Other times he just breathed deeply, steadily, like he was stuck between sleep and something else entirely. Each time, I'd quietly lead him back to bed, whispering that everything was okay. He never remembered any of it in the morning. Things got weirder a few months in. One night, I woke to a soft, repetitive tapping. At first, it was faint, like rain hitting a window, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I lay there, thinking maybe I was dreaming, but the sound continued, steady and deliberate, like a metronome. Not wind, not pipes, not the house settling. Too measured for any of that. Eventually, I got up to investigate. I didn't want to wake my partner, so I slipped out quietly. The sound was coming from the hallway. That's where I saw him. He was facing the wall, gently bumping his forehead against it, over and over. His fingers lightly brushed the wall in time with each tap, like he was trying to feel his way through it. I whispered his name. No response. I hesitated before stepping closer. Something about the way he moved, the eerie rhythm, the way his body swayed, unnerved me in a way I couldn't explain. Finally, I placed my hand on his shoulder. He blinked, took a single step back, and let me walk him to bed like nothing had happened. He didn't say a word about it the next day. It happened a few more times, but each incident was rare. I eventually told myself it was just a strange quirk of sleepwalking, some internal confusion about space or direction. Eventually, he grew out of it. The episodes stopped. The image of him standing in that hallway faded into a weird memory. I didn't think much about it, until it started happening again. But this time, it wasn't him. It was his younger brother. It began the same way, wandering at night, blank stare, shifting weight from foot to foot. I chalked it up to coincidence at first. Kids mimic each other, and sleepwalking wasn't exactly unheard of. But then I noticed the details. It wasn't just the sleepwalking, it was how he did it. The way he stood in the same hallway, moved with the same eerie pacing. His hands grazed the wall, his gaze fixed on nothing. Felt like watching a replay of a memory. And then, one night, the tapping started again. I knew what it was before I even opened the bedroom door. There he was, forehead pressed against the same spot on the wall, fingers sweeping rhythmically, like he was trying to enter something that wasn't there. I called his name, nothing. Touched his shoulder, nothing. He just kept pressing forward, swaying in that strange, dreamlike rhythm. And that's when it hit me, he'd never seen his brother do this. Not once. His brother's episodes ended years earlier. There was no logical reason he'd mirror the exact same behavior. Not just the standing or the sleepwalking, but the tapping, the location, every detail down to the way his hands moved. Something about that realization made me feel sick. I eventually roused him from the trance and tucked him back into bed. He had no memory of it the next morning. Just like before, he eventually stopped. The sleepwalking faded. The late-night tapping never returned. Life moved on. And honestly, I forgot about all of it. Until recently, with both kids off at college, the house has grown quieter than I'm used to. My partner and I decided to keep ourselves busy by doing some renovations. New paint, fresh flooring, small things to freshen up the space. One afternoon, while stripping the wallpaper in the upstairs hallway, we found something. At first, I thought it was just a patch of old adhesive or maybe some kind of panel. But as we peeled more away, my breath caught. It was a mirror, a tall, antique-style mirror, embedded into the wall itself, covered up, hidden behind layers of paper. And it was positioned exactly where both of my boys had stood, where they had pressed their heads and brushed their hands for years. I just stood there, staring at it. I had never known it was there. They certainly didn't. It was completely hidden, sealed behind decades of wallpaper. And yet, somehow they both found it. They had both tried to walk into something that should have been invisible to them, impossible to see. Forget that they were sleepwalking. They shouldn't have had any way of knowing that mirror existed. Needless to say, I got rid of it immediately, but I can't shake the feeling that it had been hidden for a reason, like it wasn't meant to be found. I don't know what it was. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it's all a coincidence. Maybe there's a rational explanation for everything. But some nights, I still hear tapping.